that in searching for the causes of the great upheavals of the past, and in considering their effects, I became skeptical of the great theories concerning celestial motions that were formulated when the historical facts described here were not all known to science. The subject deserves to be discussed in detail and quantitatively. All that I would venture to say at this time and this place is the following. The accepted celestial mechanics, notwithstanding the many calculations that have been carried out to many decimal places or verified by celestial motions, stands only if the sun, the source of light and warmth, and other radiation produced by fusion and fission of atoms, is as a whole an electrical neutral body, and also if the planets in their usual orbits are neutral bodies. Fundamental principles in celestial mechanics, including the law of gravitation, must come into question if the sun possesses a charge sufficient to influence the planets in their gravitation, in their orbits, or comets in theirs. In the Newtonian celestial mechanics, based on the theory of gravitation, electricity and magnetism play no role. Emanuel VELIKOVSKY, New York, 1950. Preface, 1965. First published in 1950, this book was left unchanged in all subsequent printing. Nor have any textual changes been made in this paper-bound edition. This was so by design. I wish to keep the text in its original form in order that, unaltered, it should face all subsequent discovery in the fields it covers or touches upon. Should there have been changes, the reader of a new edition would be unable to judge to what extent a book heretical in 1950 could measure up to later developments. In 1950, it was generally assumed that the fundamentals of science were all known and that only details and decimals were left to fill in. In that same year, a cosmologist, certainly not of a conservative bent of mind, Fred Hoyle, wrote in the conclusion of his book, The Nature of the Universe, "It is likely that any astonishing new developments are lying in wait for us. It is possible that cosmology of 500 years hence will extend as far beyond our present beliefs as our cosmology goes beyond that of Newton." And he continued, "I doubt whether this will be so. I am prepared to believe that there will be many advances in the detailed understanding of matters that still baffle us. But by and large, I think that our present picture will turn out to bear an approximate resemblance to the cosmologies of the future." And he referred to the limitations of optical means in penetrating the depth of space. The years that have passed since the publication of Worlds in Collision have seen the first great achievements in radio astronomy, the discoveries of the International Geophysical Year, and the dawn of the space age. The picture has changed completely. Signs of recent violence, disruption, fragmentation have been observed on Earth and elsewhere in the solar system. A submarine, gigantic canyon that runs almost twice around the globe, a sign of global twist, a layer of ash of extraterrestrial origin underlying all oceans. Paleomagnetic evidence that the magnetic poles were suddenly repeatedly reversed, and it is claimed the terrestrial axis with them. Gases escaping on some craters on the moon, thought to be cold to its center, and exceedingly high surface heat on Venus. Furthermore, with the discovery of radio signals arriving from Jupiter of the existence of a magnetosphere surrounding the Earth, of the solar plasma, of the net charge on the Sun, and the magnetic field permeating the interdisciplinary field of space, decisive evidence has come up that the solar system and the universe in general are not electromagnetically sterile. A basic change in the understanding of the universe, its nature, and the forces active in it. The words found in the preface of the 1950 edition, designating the work as heresy, in realms where the names Newton and Darwin reign supreme, should no longer invoke a spontaneous rejection on the part of even the most conservative in science, unless it is a defense mechanism devised to protect an inner realization of incertitude. What, to the scientist, constitutes a really satisfactory sort of success for a theory? The answer lies largely in the words generally elegance, control, and prediction. As to generality, hardly anyone raised an objection. Possibly there was some elegance in the timing when these words were written in 1960, 10 years after the publication of my book, and the great opposition it provoked. Some of the mostly compelling data were radioed by the space vehicle Pioneer 5. I would like to relate here a few details about the control and prediction of two crucial tests, decisive for this book. Early in my work, I came to the understanding that Venus is a newcomer to the planetary family, that it had a stormy, if only short history, and that it must still be very hot and giving off heat. Further, that it must be surrounded by a very extensive envelope of hydrocarbon, petroleum, gases, and dust. Such claims were in total disagreement with what was known in 1946, when I completed the manuscript of the work, or in 1950 when it was published. To stress the crucial nature of these claims, they were put under the headings the gases of Venus and the thermal balance of Venus. Immediately preceding the section the end. Should I be right in these claims, the entire chain of deductions, of which identification of the extraterrestrial agent of the paroxysm described is but the final ring, is strengthened. And since these crucial claims were in flagrant discord with the accepted values, in case of confirmation, they ought not to be denoted as lucky guesses. As late as 1959, Venus ground temperature was calculated to be only 17 degrees Celsius, 3 degrees above the mean annual temperature of the Earth. But by 1961, from the nature of the radio signals emitted by Venus, it was found that Venus ground temperature is about 315 degrees Celsius, or 600 degrees Fahrenheit. Dr. F.D. Drake of the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, responsible for this reading, wrote, "We would have expected a temperature only slightly greater than that of the Earth, and the find was a surprise in a field in which the fewest surprises were expected. There was admittingly no satisfactory explanation of such high temperature of Venus in the frame of the accepted notions. Greenhouse effect could not explain so high a temperature, nor could radioactivity decaying for billions of years. The Mariner 2, a space vehicle that passed Venus in December 1962, was instrumented to detect whether the heat is real and as high as 600 degrees. It found it real and a full 800 degrees. It found also that the night side of Venus, if anything, hotter than the day side, and that light does not penetrate the cloud cover. It must be gloomy and bleak under this cover. It is stated in the Mariner project by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, very little greenhouse effect could realize itself under such conditions. The other crucial test concerned the gaseous envelope of the planet. In 1946, 4 years before publication of this book, I directed a request and inquiry to Professor R. Wilt of Yale and the late Professor W.S. Adams of Mount Wilson and Palomar Observatories, foremost authorities on the subject of planetary atmosphere. You know, I'm thinking, I'm wondering if Halton Arp knew about VELIKOVSKY and what his thoughts were on him. That would be interesting, because Halton Arp was at Palomar, right? Furthermost authorities on the subject of planetary atmosphere indicating that the presence of hydrocarbon gases and dust in the cloud envelope of Venus would constitute a crucial test for the cosmological concepts evolved from the study of historical sources. Wilt wrote on September 13, 1946, "The absorption spectrum of Venus' atmosphere cannot be interpreted as resulting from gaseous hydrocarbons." Adams answered September 9, 1946, "There is no evidence of the presence of hydrocarbon gas in the atmosphere of Venus." I must have been completely firm in my belief of not having made a wrong deduction. From the first premise of global catastrophe to the last one, of identifying the agent to have chosen to print in disregard of the expert opinions on the basis of this research. I assume that Venus must be rich in petroleum gases. On February 26, 1963, making known the results of the Mariner probe, Dr. Homer Newell of NASA announced that in the judgment of those responsible for that part of the program, Venus is enshrouded in an envelope of hydrocarbon gases and dust, 15 miles thick, 45 miles above the ground of the planet. It was acknowledged as very puzzling that Venus should have such a massive atmosphere, a score of times heavier than the terrestrial atmosphere, that it should have taken the form of an envelope 45 miles above the surface of the planet, and that it should consist of heavy molecules of hydrocarbon gases and dust. It was also found that Venus rotates retrogradely, though very slowly, a sign of its having been disturbed in its motion in the past, or having been captured by the sun, or having originated in a way different from the other planets. At the time of the Mariner probe, two prominent members of the American scientific community, V. Bargmann, professor of physics, Princeton University, and Lloyd Motz, professor of astronomy, Columbia University, wrote a letter to Science, December 21, 1962, claiming for me the correct prediction of the great heat of Venus, of the radio noises from Jupiter, of the existence of a magnetosphere around the Earth. A paper, some additional examples of correct prognosis, written by me, was printed in the September 1963 issue of the American Behavioral Scientist. It contains a survey of various tests, confirmations, and supporting evidence. And that issue, sponsored by a group of eminent men in scholarship and public affairs, it has also told the story of reception or rejection of this book, coupled with efforts toward its suppression. It was actually successfully suppressed while in the hands of the first publisher, who had to give it up, though a #1 bestseller, under the exerted boycott of all this publisher's textbooks by certain groups organized for that purpose in some of the academic councils of the country. Some attempts were made to minimize the value of the crucial test claimed and confirmations obtained. A prominent astronomer wrote in December 1963 issue of Harper's, "As to the high temperature of Venus, hot is only a relative term. For example, liquid air is hot relative to liquid helium, whereas I claimed an incandescent state of Venus and a gaseous state of all hydrocarbons." Professor H. Hess, chairman of the Space Board of the National Academy of Sciences, volunteered to write me a letter for publication. Some of these predictions were said to be impossible when you made them. All of them were predicted long before proof that they were correct came to hand. Conversely, I do not know of any specific prediction you made that was since proven to be false. If my premises are wrong, and only by sheer chance did I obtain such a score, then the theorists of probabilities ought to find out the odds involved. If, as some friendlier skeptics assume, the score is due to an unusual gift of intuition, then I should be accused of sorcery, not only of heresy. However, if the story is a reconstruction of the events that took place and of logical implications of them, then the score is but a natural fallout from a single central idea, our Jurgens. Nevertheless, more efforts were made to disqualify this work, but hardly any astronomical argument of 1950 could be brought profitably against my book in 1964 without denying all the important discoveries of the intervening years. Therefore, attempts were made to evade all these issues and to switch the debate, actually a campaign of depreciation, to questioning my proper use of sources. When a journal printed for physicists serves its readers with philological arguments in Egyptology and commits the task to a journalist uninformed and rash in the mild appraisal of Professor Moses Macias and prints a vulgar display of ignorance and distortion, then it is as good as an admission that none of the physical arguments employed earlier could carry weight. and no new ones could be devised. It is about such tactics that the student paper, the Daily Princetonian, wrote editorially February 1964. While it could have been assumed that anyone challenging the basic premises of Newton and Darwin might be laying himself open to a certain amount of argument, the personal vituperation, deliberate misrepresentation of facts, offhand misquotations, efforts at suppression of the books containing the theories, and the denial of the right to rebut opponents in professional journals that Dr. VELIKOVSKY encountered indicate that far more was going on than mere challenge to established ideas. What the VELIKOVSKY affair made crystal clear is that the theories of science may be held not only for the truth they embody, but because of the vested interests they represent for those who hold them. The deplorable tactics of certain groups in the academia have not alienated the younger generation, and the historical and physical evidence accumulating with each passing year did not escape their sight, and conclusions were drawn. What was unbelievable and heretical in 1950 is making great inroads into the science that claimed dogmatic completeness and infallibility as recently as then. On the eve of the publication of Worlds in Collision, the Professor H. Butterfield wrote The Origin of Modern Science, 1949. But the supreme paradox of the scientific revolution is in the fact that things which we find it easy to instill into the boys at school, things which would strike us as the ordinary natural way of looking at the universe, defeated the greatest intellects for centuries. The author, 1965. Indeed. Mercury. It can be assumed with a fair amount of probability that the planet that caused the disturbances described above, the Greek Hermes, the Babylonian Nebo, to each of the planets is ascribed a world age, and the ages of the other planets, Moon, Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, and Mars, are well discernible. The dominion of Mercury must be looked for in one of the world ages, and one of the world cataclysms was apparently ascribed to this lesser planet. Mercury was a feared god long before Mars, Nergal, became one. And one of the world cataclysms apparently ascribed to this lesser planet, Mercury, was a feared god long before Mars, Nergal, became one. As the name of Mount Sinai refers to Sin, the moon, so the name of Mount Nebo in Moab, where Moses died, was called already in that early time by the name of the planet Mercury. Later in the 7th and 6th centuries, before the present era, this god was much venerated, especially by the Chaldeans and other peoples of Mesopotamia. As the names of Nabopolassar and his son Nebuchadnezzar prove, in earlier times Mercury was known to the Sumerians as Enki. Equally pronounced was the position of Thoth, the planet Mercury of the Egyptian pantheon. The theophoric part of the name Tutmos for the northern peoples, Mercury, was Odin. It is characteristic that in many astronomical texts Mercury, the Greek Hermes, the Babylonian Nebo, the Egyptian Thoth, is portrayed as the planet god which had in his dominion the physiological capacity of memory in man, as well as that of speech. According to Augustine, speech is Mercury. Direct information that confirms our assumption is provided by Hyginus. Hyginus wrote that for many centuries men lived without town or laws, speaking one tongue under the rule of Jove. But after Mercury explained the languages of men, whence he is called hermeneutes, interpreter for Mercury, in Greek is called Hermes. He too divided the nation. Then discord arose among mortals. The Romans as well as the Greeks pictured Mercury with wings, either on his headgear or at his ankles, and with an emblem, the caduceus, a staff with two snakes winding. The double serpent, caduceus, the emblem of Mercury, is found in ornaments of all peoples of antiquity. A special treatise could be written about this subject. I found the caduceus all around the world. Mercury, or Greeks, was a messenger of the gods that speeded on his errand sent by Jupiter. Among the satellites that presently orbit each of the giant planets are bodies comparable in size to Mercury or even larger. Abraham Rockenbach, whose De Comitis Tractus Novus Methodicus he had an occasion to quote when investigating the causes of the deluge, included in his treatise also the following entry. In the year of the world 1944, 288 years after the deluge, a comet was seen in Egypt of the nature of Saturn, in the vicinity of Cairo, in the constellation of Capricorn, and within the space of 65 days it traversed 3 signs in the sky. Confusions of languages and dispersals of peoples followed. On this, the text of the 11th chapter of Genesis speaks in more detail. From the annals of modern astronomy, we know of cases when a comet traveling on an elongated orbit was caught by the planet Jupiter, by which is meant the change of the cometary orbit to one of a short period, with the Sun in the focus of its orbit. It is possible to reconstruct planetary disturbances of that age with some approximation. In my understanding, Mercury was once a satellite of Jupiter, or possibly Saturn. In the course of the events which followed Saturn's interaction with Jupiter and its subsequent disruption, Mercury was pushed from its orbit and was directed to the Sun by Jupiter. It could, however, have been a comet, and the entwined snakes of the caduceus may memorialize the appearance it had when seen by the inhabitants of the Earth. At some point, a contact occurred between magnetospheres of Mercury and the Earth, described in the traditions of various nations. That the Earth was once a satellite of a giant planet is nothing more than a surmise, but we dealt with it only as with a hypothetical construction, requiring further elucidation, but with a greater show of support derived from the mythological, folkloristic sources. And we have tried to demonstrate on the case of Mercury that once it had been a satellite of one of the giant planets and was directed by Jupiter closer to the Sun. The claim, therefore, is that Mercury has traveled on its present orbit for only some 5,000 or 6,000 years. This view conflicts with both the nebular and the tidal theories of the origin of the planetary family, and with the assumption that the planets have occupied the same orbits for billions of years. Among the reasons which suggest that Mercury was the planet which caused the catastrophe of the confusion of languages is the fact that the age of Mercury follows that of Saturn. In the Hindu conception of the world ages, the Seta Yuga, the Sumerian age, was brought to a close by a general flood. Sir William Jones on the Gods of Greece, Italy, and India, 1799. The Saturnian age was, in truth, the age of the general flood. Mercury appeared soon after the beginning of the next age, the Treta Yuga, and for at least a part of this age, men lived under the aegis of Mercury. In Hindu astronomy, the usual name for the planet Mercury was Buddha. In the Bhagavatamrita, it is said that Buddha Mercury became visible in the 1002nd year of the Kali Yuga. According to John Bentley, the 1002nd year of the Kali Yuga astronomical era corresponds with the 179th year of the Treta Yuga of the poets. Remarks on the principal areas and dates of the ancient Hindus. The Bhagavatamrita describes, in mythical language, the first appearance of Mercury. On the chronology of the Hindus, Jones also placed the ancient Buddha, or Mercury, about the beginning of the Treta Yuga. In Hindu, Lord Buddha, or Mercury, is said to have married Ila of Satyavrata, the Manu of the Satra Yuga, in whose days the deluge occurred. This is the best way of saying that the time of Mercury's prominence was shortly after the deluge, the age of Saturn, the Sata Yuga, the Masa Yuga. Among the descriptive epithets applied to Mercury in India were Buddha, mind, spirit, intelligence, Sarvagana, all-knowing, Sharapinya, possessor of the 6 sciences, Avyavadi, eloquent, unequaled in speech. The presence of the god could induce forgetfulness. Nebo is regarded as the son of Marduk, or Jupiter. His chief cult center in Babylonia was Borsippa, whose ziggurat, or stepped pyramid, was consecrated to Nebo. In the Talmud, the ruins of this structure were considered to be the remains of the Tower of Babel. It was of these ruins that the canon is reported to have said a third of the tower was burnt, a third sunk into the earth, and a third is still standing. Talmud next quotes Rab as having said, "The atmosphere of the tower causes forgetfulness." Nebo was also thought of as a herald of the gods, and as presiding over all matters pertaining to the intellect. The prayer of Ashurbanipal for Nebo, the perfect sun, regulator of all things in heaven and earth, him that holds the tablet of wisdom, carrier of the stylus of fate, as Langdon, Sumerian and Babylonian Psalms, 1909. The Sumerians believe that there was a time when all mankind spoke the same language, and that it was Enki, the Sumerian god of wisdom, who confounded their speech. So concluded S.N. Kramer after publishing his translation of a Sumerian epic fragment, The Babel of Tongues, a Sumerian version, the Journal of the American Oriental Society. The text of the tablet is translated by Kramer as follows: "The whole universe, the people, in unison, to Enlil, in one tongue, Enki, the leader of the gods, endowed with wisdom, changed the speech in their mouths, brought contention into the speech of man that until then had been one." The Sumerian Enki was the same as the Babylonian Ea. The name Ea was written with the ideogram Enki, E-N-K-I. Students of Babylonian astronomy were well aware that by star of the god Ea, Mercury is meant. Thoth and Hermes of Egypt, Oxford 1922. Diodorus wrote that when Isis took over the kingdom from Osiris, Hermes, i.e. Thoth, became her chief counselor. This means that the planet Mercury was prominent in the period after Jupiter replaced Saturn as the dominant planet. Diodorus also wrote that it was by the Egyptian Hermes that the common language of mankind was first further articulated. An Egyptian hymn calls Thoth the deity that made different the tongue of one country from another. Thoth is creator of languages. So that's why I always thought it was pronounced Thoth, like thought, because that's where the word thought came from. I know a lot of people call it Thoth. I still think it's Thoth. Another text tells that this god distinguished or separated the tongue of country from country. Another recounts that he distinguished the tongue of every foreign land. Kearney comments that the words made different or distinguished or separated are past participles, alluding probably to some lost myth or legend according to which Thoth differentiated the languages of the various countries. These epithets might even be cited as evidence of an Egyptian parallel to the Hebrew fable of Yahweh in the Tower of Babel. In Egyptian text, Thoth is called Lord of Divine Words and Mighty in Speech. From one aspect, he is speech itself. Thoth could teach a man not only words of power, but also the manner in which to utter them. The words, however, must be learned from Thoth. Thoth was also known as Scribe of the Gods, and Lord of Books, the gods of the Egyptians, London, 1904. Thoth, the Hermes of Egypt, Oxford, 1922. In the dialogue, Phaedrus, Plato presents a story about the invention of letters by Thoth and explores some of the implications of this new skill. It will create forgetfulness in the learner's souls because they will not use their memories. They will trust to the external written characters and not remember of themselves. See Tatius Germania. Yet above all they worship Mercury and count it no sin to win his favor on certain days by human sacrifices. Oh boy. Odin was the head of the Nordic pantheon. A speech by Saxon envoys to Britain. We worship the gods of our fathers. That is, Jupiter, Saturn, and the rest of those that rule the world. But most of all, we worship Mercury, whom in our language we call Vodin. Of Odin, it is said he spoke so well and so smoothly that all who heard him believed all he said was true. He was associated with Hugin, or thought, and Manin, or memory. One of the myths about Odin connects him with the multiplicity of languages. The Galfaginning. It is said that the reason why Odin is known by many different names is the fact that there are in the world so many different languages. Hermes, the planet Mercury, is the deity which presides over the rational energy, wrote the Neoplatonist philosopher Prokofer. The wanderings of Ulysses, and Proclus, the last great representative of that school, elaborated in his description of Mercury's powers. Mercury unfolds into the light intellectual gifts, fills all things with divine reasons, elevates souls to intellect, wakens them as from a profound sleep. Proclus also described Hermes as responsible for distinguishing and interpreting things, recalling to memory the sources of the intellect. Thoth, an Egyptian hymn, assigns to Thoth control over man's mnemonic powers, invoking him as the deity that recalls all what had been forgotten. The city of God's seven. Arnobius argued that Mercury is simply speech and words exchanged in a conversation. Polyaenus Rhodes and Argonautica provide further details about Mercury's association with language. Here, Mercury is made responsible for the confusion of languages. The meaning is clearly that Hermes invented one language for one people, another for another. The whole account reminds one of the biblical Tower of Babel, which we'll be doing next. The caduceus was an emblem of the Babylonian deity Ningishzida. An astronomical tablet from Boghaskoy identifies Ningishzida with Nebo Mercury. Ancient Mexican codices portray the worship of entwined snakes. Latin American mythology. Jupiter's satellite Ganymede is larger than Mercury, and Saturn's biggest moon, Titan, is almost as large. Homer, the Odyssey. This was a long one. In Babylonian sources, the destructive acts of Nebo are recorded. The lofty one, furious, the word of him, causes the earth beneath to shudder. The word which in his glory he spoke. Waters have flooded the wide land. Babylonian liturgies, Paris, 1913. R.S. Harrington and T.C. Van Flandern, our buddy Tom Van Flandern, a dynamical investigation of the conjecture that Mercury is an escaped satellite of Venus. Icarus 28, 1976. got a green light. Something happened to the sound. Oh man. Maybe it's the video. Let's advance it. Just, it might shake things up. The confusion of languages. The sequence of events as presented in the book of Genesis places the catastrophe of Babel next after the deluge. And the whole land was of one language and of one speech. And they said, Let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they will have all one language. Let us go down and confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from the face of the earth. Is that the beginning of the Great Schism? The rabbinical sources explain that the purpose of the tower was to secure a shelter to the city of Babel in case the deluge should occur another time. The men who were before us God has destroyed with a deluge. If he shall think again fit to be wroth with us, and seek to destroy us even with a deluge, we shall all perish to a man. But come, let us prepare bricks and burn them with fire, and they may withstand the waters, and building them together with asphalt, let us make a high tower, the top of which shall reach to heaven, in order that being delivered from the deluge, we may find safety in the tower. The purpose of the builders is found also in an account of this catastrophe, which the Aborigines of Central America transmitted from generation to generation. Oh boy. Ixtosekitl, after narrating the story of the deluge, which brought to a close the first world age, Atanasia, and destroy most of mankind, described the catastrophe which ended the second age, or Adikanasia, the son of wind. And as men were therefore multiplying, they constructed a very high and strong Zakuali, which means a very high tower, in order to protect themselves when again the second world should be destroyed. At a crucial moment, their languages were changed. And as they did not understand one another, they went into different parts of the world. The same author also gives another version of the same catastrophe. When 1,715 years had passed since the deluge, men were destroyed by a violent hurricane, Hurricane, which carried off trees, mountains, houses, and people, great buildings, although many men and women escaped, especially those that were able to take refuge in caves and places where this great hurricane could not reach. Similarly, wrote Gomorrah, circa 1510 to 1560. The wind which occurred at that time was so great and of such force that it overthrew all the buildings and trees and even broke mountains apart. Now, that's got to be some wind, man. Many of the sources which recount the destruction of the Tower of Babel maintain, in close accord with the Mexican account, that the catastrophe was caused by a violent wind. Thus, the Sibyl is said to have prophesied, when are fulfilled the threats of the great God with which he threatened men, when formerly in an Assyrian land they built a tower, and all were of one speech, and wished to rise even till they climbed unto the starry heaven. Then the immortal raised a mighty wind, and laid upon them strong necessity. For when the wind threw down the mighty tower, then rose among mankind fierce strife and hate. One speech was changed into many dialects, and earth was filled with divers tribes and kings. In the book of Jubilees, it is said that the Lord sent a mighty wind against the tower and overthrew it upon the earth. The Babylonian account, as transmitted by Abydenus, tells that once men built a high tower where now is Babylon. When it was already close to heaven, the gods sent winds and ruined the entire scheme, and men, having till then been all the time been all of the same speech, received now from the gods many languages. Other accounts give the impression that a strong electrical discharge, possibly from an overcharged ionosphere, found a contact body in the high structure. According According to a tradition known to the 12th century traveler Benjamin of Tudela, fire from heaven fell in the midst of the tower and broke it asunder. In the tractate Sanhedrin of the Babylonian Talmud, it is said, a third of the tower was burnt, a third sank into the earth, and a third is still standing. The Tower of Babel story was found in the most remote parts of the world prior to the arrival of missionaries. In those places, thus before the biblical account became known to the Aborigines. For instance, on the island of Hao, part of the Pumatu or Tamotu Islands in Polynesia. The people used to tell that after a great flood, the sons of Rata, who survived, made an attempt to erect a building by which they could reach the sky and see the creator god, Veta or Atia. But the god in anger chased the builders away, broke down the building, and changed their language so that they spoke diverse tongues. The question of biblical influence was discussed by the folklorist. They, the natives of Hao, declared that this tradition existed already with their ancestors before the arrival of the Europeans. I leave to them the responsibility for this declaration. All I can certify is that this tradition contains many ancient words which today are no longer understood by the natives. Papavu, the sacred book of the Kish Mayas, narrates that the language of all the families that were gathered at Tulin was confused and none could understand the speech of the others. The Casca Indian story makes the result into the cause. The Indians narrate that a great darkness came on, and high winds which drove the vessels hither and thither. The people became separated. Some were driven away. Long afterwards, when in their wanderings they met people from another place, they spoke different languages and could not understand one another. With this exception, the Casca story may refer to any great upheaval and is actually an effect of large-scale migrations. The traditions of the peoples make the catastrophe the immediate cause of the confusion of languages and the dispersion as well, while the account in Genesis and that given by Abydos and various other sources connect the story with a certain place in Mesopotamia. The traditions localize it in many different countries. In each case, the entire population of the world is said to have been affected. If the nature of the catastrophe was cosmic, the same occurrence could have taken place in different countries. In this case, the existence of similar traditions in many corners of the globe is of no avail for tracing the migration of ancient tribes. The Arabic tradition makes South Arabia the scene of the upheaval, followed by the confusion of languages and migrations. Similar experiences could have been brought about by one and the same cause in many places. It appears that after the flood of the plain of Mesopotamia became one of the few cultural centers in the world, another flood would have caused the utter destruction of the human race. And this was feared because the memory of the flood a few centuries earlier was very vivid. Observations of the movements of the heavenly bodies may have provided a warning of a new catastrophe, and large structures were built for refuge. But when the event came, the structures were overwhelmed, were destroyed by hurricanes and powerful electric discharges. In the rabbinical concept of the seven earths, molded out of one another in successive catastrophes, the generation which built the Tower of Babel inhabited the fourth earth, but it goes on to the fifth earth, where the men became oblivious of their origin and home. Those who built the Tower of Babel are told to forget their language. This generation is called the people who lost their memory. The earth which they inhabited was the fifth earth, that of Livian, Nesia. In the ancient Mexican traditions, that it is told that those who survived the catastrophe of Son of Wind lost their reason and speech. The characteristic of this catastrophe was its influence upon the mental or mnemonic capacity of the peoples. The description of, as told by many tribes and peoples, if it contains authentic features, arouses the surmise that the Earth underwent an electromagnetic disturbance, and that the human race experienced something that in modern terms seems like a consequence of a deep electrical shock. I'll say the application of electrical current to the head of a human being often results in a partial loss of memory. Also, a loss of speech may be induced by the application of electrodes to specified areas of the brain. Some of the sources assert that the builders of the tower feared a world conflagration. Similarly, the sacred writings of the Burmese relate that when the world is destroyed by wind, the wind begins to blow and gradually increases. At first, it only raises sand and small stones, but at length it whirls about immense rocks and the summits of mountains. F. Buchanan on the religion and literature of the Burmese. The order of the Sun Ages of the ancient Mexicans is given differently by different authors, but the most reliable of the sources, the Vatican Codex. I wonder why it's the Vatican. What would they know about Mexico? Ixtlilxochitl and Venetia all agree that Echinacea, or the Son of Wind, was the second age, following after the Son of Water, or Echinacea. The tradition that fire from heaven destroyed the tower is also a feature of some of the Mesoamerican accounts. The legend recorded by Pedro de los Rios concerning the foundation of the pyramid, Cholula. Told you about them pyramids.
Cholula.
In Mexico, after the waters of the deluge had recorded, one of the survivors, Cholula, where he began to build a large structure. It was his to raise the mighty edifice to the clouds, but the gods, offended at his presumption, hurled the fire of heaven down on the pyramid. Many of the workmen perished, and the building remained unfinished. Fraser adds that it is said that at a time of Spanish conquest, the inhabitants of Cholula preserved with great veneration a large aerolite, which according to them was the very thunderbolt that fell on the pyramid and set it on fire. Another Mexican tradition recorded by Diego Duran in 1579 tells of giants who built a tower that almost reached the heavens when it was destroyed by a thunderbolt. The tradition was among those collected Cayo in 1912 or 1913. His publication contains the story in the original Polynesian and in a French translation. The question of whether the Greeks transmitted an account of the same events was debated by several writers in antiquity, including Philo of Alexandria, Cyril of Alexandria, and Origen. The writers saw a link between the story of the revolt of the giants and the sons of Alois, who piled Ossa upon Olympus, and Pelion atop Ossa in a vain effort to reach the lofty dwelling of Zeus and make a war on the gods, and the account of the construction of the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11:3-8. The earliest allusion to these events is in Homer's Odyssey. Homer ascribes the destruction of the giants to Apollo. Pliny and Macrobius, Saturn 1:19-7, identified Apollo with the planet Mercury. That Mercury and Apollo were alternate names for Stilben, the planet Mercury. Hesiod ascribed the battle with the giants as an immense catastrophe involving the earth and heaven alike. The boundless sea rang terribly abound, and the earth crashed loudly. Wide heaven was shaken and groaned, and high Olympus reeled from its foundations under the charge of the undying gods. And a heavy quaking reached Tartarus. The cry of both armies as they shouted reached to starry heaven. Then Zeus no longer held back his might, but straight his heart was filled with fury, and he showed forth all his strength. From heaven and from Olympus he came forthwith, hurling his lightning. The bolts flew thick and fast from his strong hand, together with thunder and lightning whirling with awesome flame. The life-giving earth crashed around in burning, and the vast wood cracked loud with fire all about, and the land seethed, oceans, streams, and the unfruitful sea. The hot vapor lapped round the earthborn titans. Flame unspeakable people rose to the bright upper air. The flashing glare of the thunder shone, and lightning blinded their eyes, for all that they were strong. It seems as if earth and wide heaven above came together, for such a mighty crash would have arisen if the earth were being hurled to ruin, and heaven from on high were hurling her down. Also the winds brought rumbling earthquake and dust storm, thunder and lightning, and the lurid thunderbolt, which are the shafts of great Zeus. Seneca also referred to the same events in mentioning Jupiter's thunderbolts, by which the threefold mass of mountains fell, and a tradition held that this was the first occasion on which Jupiter used his bolts. Ovid, Fasti 3. The pagans disputed with the Jews and Christians whether Moses took the story from Homer or Homer from Moses, but the common origin of the two accounts was generally conceded. The early writer, Eupolemus, drew on both sources in asserting that the city of Babylon had been founded by those who saved themselves from the deluge. They were giants, and they built the famous tower, Vesuvius. From the viewpoint of sequential chronology, the link is plausible. The giants' revolt is said to have occurred not long after Zeus had taken over from Kronos, the dominion of the sky, and it marks the real beginning of Jupiter's dominion. And to end this long tale, this is told in allegorical form in the tale of the wanderings of Adam, the myth of man. Adam, traveling through all 7 earths, is a transparent allegory of the physical and human history of Earth. Midrash Rabbah to Genesis. Exodus, Ginsburg Legends 1. Zohar Ruth and other sources in Ginsburg Legends 5. It is said that the place where the tower once stood retains the peculiar quality of inducing a total loss of memory in anyone who passes it. Really. The Native Races, San Francisco, 1882, H. Bancroft. The electrical convulsive therapy used in psychiatry for the treatment of certain mental cases is administered by passing current through electrodes on the forehead. Shock treatments conducted through the brain. The electric discharge causes a period of confusion and subsequent complete, though temporary, loss of memory of the events immediately preceding the discharge. A number of patients complain also of consequent disturbances of longer duration, and some of them suffer a patchy retrograde amnesia. See Siskind in Archive of Neurological Psychiatry, Chicago, 1941. That's why I like to read the footnotes, because there can be as much information there, if not more, than the article or the book.
Nigel said, noticed my comment on YT last night was deleted. Was I being rude? If I was, then that was not my intent. Anyway, all the best. I heard you are a bit ill. Hope you are on the mend. All the
Just a heads up that anyone who's a mod can show or hide your comments too.
I was waiting for the intro. That's Electric Universe. Damn it. That's okay. I hear it enough. 17 times a day. I gotta have it. You know, I wanted to make a comment on the whole. The electric sun hypothesis. The basics. In this day and age, there is no longer any doubt that electric effects in plasmas play an important role in the phenomena we observe on the sun. The major properties of the electric sun, ES model, are as follows. Most of the space within our galaxy is occupied by plasma, rarefied ionized gas, containing electrons, negative charges, and ionized atoms, positive charges. Every charged particle in the plasma has an electric potential energy, voltage, just as every pebble on a mountain has a mechanical potential energy with respect to sea level. The sun is at the center of a plasma cell, called the heliosphere, that stretches far out, several times the radius of Pluto. As of 9/9/2012, the radius of this plasma cell has been measured to be greater than 18 billion kilometers, or 122 times the distance from the sun to Earth. These are facts, not hypotheses. The sun is at a more positive electrical potential, voltage, than is the space plasma surrounding it, probably in the order of several thousand volts. Positive ions leave the sun and electrons enter the sun. Both of these flows add to form a net positive current flowing through the sun, entering at the poles and leaving radially at lower latitudes. This constitutes a plasma discharge, analogous in every way, except size, to those that have been observed in electrical plasma laboratories for decades. Because of the sun's positive charge, voltage, it acts as the anode in a plasma discharge. As such, it exhibits many of the phenomena observed in earthbound plasma laboratory experiments. In the plasma universe model, cosmic-sized, low-density currents create the galaxies and the stars within those galaxies by the electromagnetic sea-pinch effect. It is only a small extrapolation to ask whether these currents remain in place to power those stars. I remember reading from, was it Celeria Benaria last night, or was it from VELIKOVSKY, that at one time, oh, it was in the Sagittarius thing, at one time when they said that humans were, what do you call it when you talk mind to mind? Come on, what's the word?
Telepathic.
Telepathic. That it was actually the gods talking to the lower, like man, and telling them what to do. And then, but that at some point stopped. And now people who hear voices think that, they're schizophrenics. They might just be tuning into a different dimension. Who knows? But, that's kind of crazy, because he was just saying that we had to learn how to talk all over again, and it was like an electric shock just kind of brought that thought out, you know. It's interesting. I wonder if we were created to be slaves sometimes. We got here, we had to get here somehow. You know, that's all.
Does make sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. All right, we'll go on to this. I already played recently, so I got to move on from this one. Let's see what's coming up next. We got it on shuffle. So let's hit the next button. An ancient tradition ascribed the establishment of moon worship to Adam, the first man. The medieval Arab scholar Abu Bakr wrote, "They, the Sabians, say that Adam was born from male and female, just like the rest of mankind. But they honored him greatly and said that he had come from the moon, that he was the prophet and apostle of the moon, and that he had exhorted the nations that they should serve the moon. They also related about Adam that when he had left the moon and proceeded from the area of India towards Babylonia, that he brought many wonders with him." The Adamites, the antediluvian men, were most probably not the first human beings on the planet, even admitting that by expulsion from the Garden of Eden is allegorized a catastrophe which quite destroyed mankind prior to the deluge. It is impossible to declare that it was the first catastrophe. It depends on the memory of the peoples which catastrophe they consider as the act of creation. Human beings, rising from some catastrophe, bereft of memory of what had happened, regarded themselves as created from the dust of the earth. All knowledge about the ancestors, who they were, and in what interstellar space they lived, was wiped away from the memory of the few survivors. The Talmudic rabbinical tradition believes that before Adam was created, the world was more than once inhabited and more than once destroyed. It was at the end of the first age, symbolized by the expulsion of man from the blessed Garden of Eden, that the moon lost its brightness. It was not just a single human pair. The tradition ascribes to Adam the invention of 70 languages. Hebrew mythology assigns to the period preceding Adam's expulsion different geophysical and biological conditions. The sun shone prominently on the earth, and the Garden of Eden, placed in the east, was, it must be conceived, under perpetual rays of the dawn. The earth was not watered by rain, but mist, ascending from the ground, condensed as dew upon the leaves. The plants looked only to the earth for nourishment. Man was of exceedingly great stature. The dimensions of man's body were gigantic. His appearance was unlike that of later man. His body was overlaid with a horny skin. But a day came, and the celestial illumination ceased. The sun had grown dark the instant Adam became guilty of disobedience. The flames of the ever-turning sword terrified Adam. Genesis 3:24. In another legend, it is told that the celestial light shone a little in the darkness, and then a celestial light ceased, to the consternation of Adam. The illumination of the first period never returned. The sky that man was used to see never appeared before him again. The firmament is not the same as the heavens of the first day. The day of Genesis, as I have already noted, is said to be equal to 1,000 years. It was after the fall of man, according to Hebrew tradition, that the sun set for the first time. The first time Adam witnessed the sinking of the sun, he was seized with anxious fears. All the night he spent in tears. When day began to dawn, he understood that what he had deplored was but the course of nature. It was also then the seasons began. That's pretty good lyrics. This is told in the following story. Adam noticed that the days were growing shorter and feared lest the world be darkened. But after the winter solstice, he saw that the days grew longer again. The earth also underwent changes, independent before. She was hereafter to wait to be watered by the rain from above. The variety of species diminished. Man, according to Hebrew legends, decreased in size. There was a vast difference between his later and his former state, between his supernatural size then and his shrunken size now. He also lost his horny skin. The whole of nature altered its ways. References:
Athanasius-Kircher, Tower of Babel, Conatologia, Amsterdam, 1679, p. 134. The very angels and the celestial beings were grieved by the transgression of Adam. The moon alone laughed, wherefore God obscured her light. Ginsberg Legends I. 80. Ginsberg Legends I.
79 and Ginsberg Legends 76. Worship of the moon. Because of its size, and also because of the events which accompanied the first appearance of the moon, many ancient peoples regarded the moon as the chief of two luminaries. The sun was of smaller importance than the moon in the eyes of the Babylonian astrologers. The Assyrians and the Chaldeans referred to the time of the moon god as the oldest period in the memory of the people, before other planetary gods came to dominate the world ages. The moon was a supreme deity. Such references are found in the inscriptions of Sargon II, circa 720 BC, and Nabonidus, circa 550 BC. The Babylonian Sin, the moon, was a very ancient deity. Mount Sinai owes its name to Sin. The moon, appearing as a body larger than the sun, was endowed by the imagination of the peoples with a masculine role, while the sun was assigned a feminine role. Many languages reserved a masculine name for the moon. It was probably when the moon was removed to a greater distance from the earth and became smaller to observers on the earth that another name, usually feminine, came to designate the moon in most languages. C. Bezold in Baal was considered to be the father of the sun god Shamash, Utu, and was commonly addressed as Father Sin, Sumerian and Babylonian. Psalms 1909. F. Kumant noted the prominence of Sin in the earliest historical period in Babylonia and found it remarkable that at first the primacy was assigned to the moon. Astrology and Religion Among the Greeks and Romans, page 124. The late Assyrio-Babylonian cult of the moon. According to the Dabistan, a Persian work of early Islamic times, the Kaaba of Mecca was originally dedicated to the worship of the moon. On moon worship, among the ancient Arabs, also
Touch Sinaitische Schriften, Zeitschrift des Deutsches Morgenländisches Gesellschaft 3, 1849, p. 202, and Oshanda, Vorweilemische Religion der Araber Ibid, 7, 1853.
The Greeks regarded the moon as of greater importance than the sun. The sun's subordination to the moon is a remarkable feature of early Greek myth. Helios was not even an Olympian, but a mere Titan's son, Hyperions. And this is a long one. C.R. Markham, London, 1873, describes sacrifices to the moon by the natives of Peru in the 16th century. So the Indians of Vancouver Island assigned greater importance to the moon than the sun. E.B. Taylor, Primitive Culture, 1929, as did several tribes in Brazil. See Sargon's display inscription, since distant days of the age of Nanaru. A cuneiform text describes the first appearance of the moon, when the gods fixed the crescent of the moon to cause the new moon to shine forth, to create the month, the new moon, which was created in heaven, with the majesty in the midst of heaven arose. R.W. Rogers, Cuneiform Parallels of the Old Testament, 1912. J. Louis, The Late Assyrio-Babylonian Cult of the Moon and Its Culmination in the Time of Nabonidus, quotes Philochorus as having Macrobius, Saturnalia 8, quotes Philochorus as having said that men offer sacrifices to the moon, dressed as women, and women dressed as men, because the moon is thought to be both male and female. You know, I noticed on the video of mine, Worship of Saturn.
Well, enjoy the rest of your night and
claiming that
do the work
Osiris
you need to get done for the next upload.
To look like Saturn, and therefore all the dead were to be swathed.
I think
like
live stream Friday night or Saturday night is probably the
so
best.
they were emulating,
you know, because people don't have to get up early in the morning for work, or
it's been wrapped in bandages. It's very interesting. And that pretty much cinches it. They had to have seen it. How else would they know? In 2016, I took up painting. It's something that I always wanted to do. I just never did. I got a couple of interesting pictures here. Now, I'm a that's not interesting. All right, guys. I guess we're gonna call it. We don't have a whole lot of folks here, and I'm kind of probably gonna get to work on my next upload. I got a lot of work to do, and maybe we'll try it again later. You know, I was hoping we could have a party, but well, you know, it's Sunday night. And we do have 13 viewers. That's pretty good, actually, for 4 o'clock in the morning. But what's really bothering me is this damn buffering. It's poor and it's good. And I know what that's going to be like when it becomes watch time. It's going to be skipping. But you know what? I'll hang out for a little longer. I really want to, but I see it going red and yellow and green, and it's just bothering me. All right. One more. I'm a glutton for punishment. I actually love hanging out with you guys. So let's keep it going for a little bit. We're going to skip my painting, and we'll go to the next one.
Okay. And that's one of his failings, one of his ego trips. And Enkidu teaches him, Gilgamesh, to be a little bit more humble. That's what basically what the story is all about. It's a play to
a parable
to teach people humility and to be nicer to one another, and it's all a way of the elite to control people's thinking so that they don't turn on the elite.
Right.
Or they I mean,
doesn't it what it always comes down to? They
would turn on the king and kill him.
Yeah.
And so they made So they made that illegal in the eyes of who? God. You'd go to hell if you ever did that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So guess what? Nobody's gonna go kill the king now.
No, I think that's more like it. I think that's more like the origin of this story. I think that's what it's about.
Yeah.
A parable, the first type of control parable.
It's the same. It's the same kind. Like, people don't think that Buddhism is a form of control, but this attainment of enlightenment is a form of control. You do these bad things, you're not gonna progress. You do all these good things, and you don't kill, and you don't do this, and you follow these rules that we set down. The only rule that you need in life, period, end of story, is do unto others as you would have done unto you. Period. That's it. I mean, you want to be killed, go kill somebody. You want to poke somebody's eye out, you have your eye poked out. That's the way life should be run by everybody and thought of by everybody. Do unto others.
I agree, rather than gain advantage all the time. You
don't need any other bloody rules in life.
Do unto others, then split.
That's evil. That's pure evil. I don't like it anymore.
It's more fun though.
Yeah. Do unto others.
Split pretty quick.
No, but seriously, I see it is a control mechanism. I see that. Mm-hmm.
So this comes down to, Greg, when we were talking the other night, and that when you started on this, and you'll be, do I do this? Yeah, give it a crack, throw it out there. They're nice short videos. Gets a bit of, things anyway. And like I said to you yesterday, so I was trying to look up. I had to remember who I had read a few years ago. So there's a bloke in California called Monty Roberts. You ever heard of him, Rick?
No.
No, obviously not. Righto. So Monty Roberts is a bloke who's done really, really well with horses. And his big thing is this. So I sent this to Greg. For centuries, humans have said to horses, you do what I tell you or I'll hurt you. Humans say to each other still, threaten, force, and intimidate. I'm convinced that my discoveries, well, that could be horses, humans, anything.
Is this the horse whisperer?
Have value in the workplace. Yes.
The horse
in the
whisperer?
education and penal system, yes.
Okay,
yes.
I've seen it. I've seen one of his videos.
In the education and penal system, and in raising of children. At heart, I'm saying that none of us was born with the right to say you must or I'll hurt you to any animal or any human, right? That's one. And respect, well, his view of respect is traditional, was void of any respect for the rights, fears or desires of, well, you could call it a horse, human, whatever. So you don't care about the other person's desires or anything. You just care about number one. So, and this is true, a horse or a person needs to know who's boss. This statement qualifies to anyone who's in charge to force the pain, right? So his belief is to learn, you do it with praise and respect. For these reasons, the word breaking is quite appropriate in traditional training. So you go to school, if you didn't do what you're told, what happened to you? You got belted in you, didn't you?
Or you got broke in.
No, and that's really what he's talking about. Yeah, you got broken in. yeah. So, it's taken 6,000 years to begin to realise that that's really not the best way, right? So I read his books going back a few years ago when we were doing eventing and stuff with horses, right? Because it does seem to work a lot easier, but it takes patience. And when Greg was, I thought, and I was thinking the other night when he was talking about it, and I couldn't remember his name, and it came to me yesterday. It's a bastard when that happens, isn't it, Greg? Yeah. So what I'm getting at is, you're right, and people like him in the modern world have sort of found it in different ways. I don't have to demand.
So what you're
And
saying, I'm sorry.
These stories. Sorry, Greg, you talk.
No, Andy, keep going. We're digressing, but keep going.
Well,
Keep going.
basically, what I'm getting at, these stories are about the ultimate way of control. What Rick says is through fear and things like that. And
Right.
that there is an alternative. But the elite don't want you to have the alternative because that could empower you.
Yes. That you actually make friends with the animal and it does it voluntarily because it wants to help you, because it feels brotherly to you, or a friend, you know. And that is the way. That is the way with horses as well, and dogs. You can't make a dog love you by kicking it, you know, or a horse.
No.
And they'll do anything for you if they love you. Simple as that. So yeah.
If they trust.
Built on fear.
It's the same with a person. If a person trusts you, a person will do so much for you.
Yeah.
Basically, modern religions have the philosophy of scare people straight, make them think that where they're headed for, if they continue this path, is so grisly that it's beyond thought. So we better repent your sins and live this way. That's the way I see all modern religions.
Yeah, control systems.
Yeah.
And when were they made? Back in the Roman days.
What is a sin? As Rick said before, the sin's really that I'm not following whoever's dictating the law, their law. I have an alternative. And if that are my alternative, I'm now a sinner.
So do you think these people had space stations up there and all that, like it says, or do you think that that's really taking it too far? You know, remember Aristotle. Okay, Aristotle said that if we really knew our true origin, it would be too wild to believe. Something to that effect. So, you know, I mean,
well, we have no idea, do we? We just have no idea.
We really don't.
And the only people who know anything about it could be the mystics. You know, that these the only people, like you said, the remote viewers from antiquity. They're the only people.
Yeah, but which mystic do you believe? That's the problem.
That is a problem. Yeah, I think you can only believe the consensus of them, really, or sort of, if you can glean anything out of a consensus, then go with that. Like you say, mystics is a very, very personal. It's a personal way of looking at things, isn't it? No two people have the same vision.
How do you guys view remote viewing? Do you think it's horseshit?
No, I don't think it's horseshit.
There's something there.
Mm-hmm.
There's some kind of woogie thing going on.
Woo. Yeah.
Well, I think it has more to do with the electric force and the connection, the instant connection that the sun knows exactly where the, is at any one given second of. There has to be something going on there.
Then what about Pat Price's remote viewing aliens that actually observed him remote viewing them?
Sure, aliens. Come on. If there's an advanced species, it's probably, this is going to sound stupid and silly, but Wallace Thornhill, Electric Universe, coronas of suns are what? A plasma envelope with probably a planet or two or three, maybe even inside it. Same as we were inside the brown dwarf star Saturn.
There's no doubt to me.
So if there is an advantage, they didn't go through the same thing that we went through. Our plasma shield dropping, going into this new solar environment that we're in, that changed us, that changed our Earth, that expanded our Earth, giving the Earth way more energy than Saturn could. That expanded the Earth 50% or a little, maybe a little less, but increased the gravity about 50%.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, and that brings us. See, I have no doubt of any of that. I'm sure of it, but
I mean, we witnessed Soho and all of these cameras focused on the sun. We can see stuff going into the sun and not causing any problem, and then we see stuff shooting out of the sun, and these bubble. I'm pretty sure double layer bubble that sit there and look like they drain energy off the sun. What is that?
Yeah, no doubt. I've seen that before.
So the only thing that makes sense is if double layers can keep out temperatures of 87,000 degrees, well, don't you think that they could probably protect a ship against the sun, creating a double layer so that all that energy doesn't penetrate to the surface of the ship? Who knows? There could be a way more advanced species inside the sun, and they could have claim to this solar system too. Yep. Because we're the intruders.
That's right.
We came in through Saturn. It was pulled into this solar system. Boom.
And if there were beings on the sun, they'd be very highly energetic beings as well.
Not necessarily the sun, not on the sun. They would have to be inside the corona. They wouldn't survive on the surface. It's 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 degrees there, man.
It is, but like you said, there's double layers, so that's the surface, and you could just go under the surface, and maybe it's cool.
No, the sun's surface is probably a double layer, but there are other double layers in its atmosphere as well. Just like
the ionosphere of the Earth.
Layers.
The ionosphere of the Earth has 400,000 volts in it.
Yeah,
of positive electricity. If it was to be ionized, the Earth would look like a star.
It's the whole. Look at the electric discharges to see the different double layers in the Earth's atmosphere. Way up high, we get the elves, and there's another type of discharge that's above the elves.
Yeah.
Then we get what? The blue jets.
The Earth and the sun are connected in real time.
Then we get the red sprites. Then we get the blue jets on top of the thunderclouds. And then we get electric discharge within the layers of the thunderclouds. And then we get the electric discharge, the short circuits between the ground and the cloud and the bottom double layer of the atmosphere. There's multiple double layers in Earth's atmosphere. The sun probably has multiple double layers as well. So does Venus so does Jupiter and Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
What?
So really, we are a duplicate of, you could say, in a smaller way, we are a duplicate of what you're talking about with the sun. The sun is just bigger, hotter than we are.
Hey, check this out.
And that ionosphere is doing the same to us as what you're talking about with the sun. It's protecting us.
No, the sun shortened our lives.
We can live with.
Yeah, the sun shortens our lives.
Yeah,
the sun shortened our lives.
We lived longer when we were in the red light of our star.
Yep.
Yes, but more I'm getting at, even when we're in the red light, we would have had something. There would have been something that still gave you some protection from too much energy.
What the problem is all these cosmic rays and stuff that just zip right through you. Mm-hmm. If you're contained inside a corona of a sun, mm-hmm. You think any of these super heavy or super light energetic particles is going to penetrate into that plasma? No, they're going to be captured inside that plasma double layer.
That's why they lived so long. Yes.
Yeah.
Check this out. One day, Ingo Swann, who was a famous remote viewer, decided on remote viewing the planet Jupiter. During the time, the NASA Pioneer 10 was to make a flight around the planet. Ingo described a ring around Jupiter before the astronauts could even take a picture. And, this isn't going where I thought it was going to go. This incident was published by Stanford University. Regardless, many scientists were impressed by the information and most accepted the existence of remote viewing. Among the many different successes that Ingo Swann remote viewed, okay, maybe we're getting there, on the objects found on the moon. Unfortunately, he also went through mistreatment by some CIA officers. At times, the CIA already had information on the locations he was asked to remote view. Ingo claimed they never really needed his help. He remote viewed some aliens, I think, on the moon. You've lost me? Are you back?
Well,
so I'm
you see,
saying,
Yeah.
I'm trying to get to where, and he said while he was remote viewing these aliens, they discovered his presence, and he got scared, and they even tried to follow him back. That's pretty wild, man.
Yeah,
I thought this was going there, but I don't think it is. It's just talking about the CIA. But I saw Ganymede and Jupiter there, and I thought it was going to go there, but he just talks about, this is just kind of tame. I want to see the one where he was talking about having dine-outs and freaking Enceladus, and it was crazy. I'm like, oh, come on. That's got to be ridiculous. But then everybody says, no, remote viewing works. It's real. But, how do you know? It could just be your imagination.
I've had a good experience with remote viewing, Greg. I don't know if I told you, I predicted the first three horses in the Grand National, which is a very popular horse race over here. There's about 30 horses run over a 3-mile course, and I don't know if you're aware of, you know it. And I got the first 3 horses. Unfortunately, you've got to be very specific with the questions you ask, and I didn't get them in the right order. I was so confident that I had the right solution that I just threw the money on the nail, didn't go each way on it or anything like that, and I would have won about. Just for a $5 bet, I would have won about £800. And
wow, man, you should have went with it.
I know. Well, I did. I went, but I put I picked the first, second, and the third horses in my confidence, in my supreme confidence. But the third came in first, and the second come in third, and the first come in second. So I got a few pounds out of it, but not like £1,000, which I would have done if I'd have asked my question right. And yes, I mean, I concentrated on the question, and the answer came to me, and it came visually, and I've done it. It's not the only time I did it, because I did these exercises, and I could really get them right, provably. Maybe more than 50% of the time, I would get a shape, and it'd work out correct. You know, that you can't exactly see when something comes into your mind, when the question you ask for, a picture sort of formulates in your mind, you can't necessarily see what it is. It's got a shape, so you might just quickly scribble the shape down, and then you might get a feeling of blue or purple or a colour, so you'll put that down, and it all adds up. It all adds up to something. Like for me, I could picture the colour of the horses that came past the winning line, and what colours the jockey had on, and that's how I did it. And it's the same with remote healing. That seems to be
It's a connection to the ether. That connection that everything shares. That electric connection that, or energy connection. I don't know if you can call it electric at that point. It's some
information field. There's some information field that we can get hold of.
It builds all the electrons of all the different varieties of electrons that exist out there. The proton and the electron are probably one and the same particle, just at different energy states, at different frequency levels. I've been talking to a fellow named Robert, and he's been an interesting fellow to talk to, and I'm impressed with you know him. He's in the EPCM chat.
Robert Ashcroft.
Who is
Ashcroft? Yeah.
Robert Ashcroft.
I didn't want to use his last name.
On that thing,
damn
all right,
it.
well, check this out. Okay, I just want to read this. It's just.
we can cut that.
Can you cut that out? Don't use his name,
yes. I'll cut it out. Okay, this is what I'm talking about right here. Ingo concludes he is likely on the dark side of the moon and is surprised to detect what he interprets as the presence of some sort of atmosphere. This, of course, would only be the beginning of his surprises on this viewing. After this unusual and comparatively tame experience, he is given another set of coordinates on the moon by Axel, at which point he becomes aware of a greenish haze. He reports that this haze appears to be emanating from a crater and surrounded by darkness. Now, I think automatically of that one crater with the blue, but this says green. Before reporting that this haze appears to be coming from actual lights given off a green hue on the top of towers of some kind. At this point, he apologized to Axel, assuming this vision must be consequence of some kind of error, since he assumes that there cannot possibly be lights on the moon. At this point, Axel appears bewildered and asks him if he is indeed certain that he is seeing actual lights. Ingo goes on to tell Axel that the towers which possess the lights appear to be extremely large. He asks Axel if either NASA or the Soviets have some kind of secret base on the moon. He receives no answer. As Ingo wrestles through how this could possibly be, he straightforwardly asks Axel if the technology he is viewing is not ours, to which Axel responds with a grin. Quite a surprise, isn't it? Shortly after this, Axel admitted to Ingo that this psychic expedition did indeed involve attempting to interpret photographic evidence that had been acquired from the moon, but whose resolution was not adequate to the task. It is at a point that they brought Ingo in for the job. Here's the good stuff. At the next session, Axel gave Ingo more coordinates on the moon, at which point he reported towers, various machines giving off lights of various colors in the midst of unusual buildings. Some of these buildings, in Ingo's mind, had clearly been designed by some sort of being, and in some sort of a being, and for some sort of being, rather than being the product of some kind of cosmic accident. At this point, he described what he interpreted as some sort of being, males, who were either human or at least humanoid, naked and performing some kind of task on the moon. They appeared to be surrounded by a green mist and digging into a hillside or cliff. I'll just stop there. I mean, that's pretty freaking wild. And he goes on to say that they discover him and they chase him out of there. He got scared. Now, how could they discover him? Wow, that must mean there must be some kind of real physical travel of something. The Ka that the Egyptians speak of. Perhaps. Did I lose you guys?
I think the Ka is confused for the soul, which is also confused for this connection that we all share to this ether that we can all connect, but some are more genetically in tune to connect to it more easily. We all get feelings and deja vu and things like that.
Yeah.
We all get that. there's a basic level of connection, and then there's other levels that some of these people can see, perhaps the faint ring around Jupiter before scientists see it. If they're astral projecting, you know, in the area of Jupiter, and they happen to look over there and they see this ring, they'd know, right?
Yeah. In his
so
vision.
there are good things about that, but you have to remember that a lot of people in this field make it their living. And just like fiction books, they're making stuff up. Not all of it, not the base stuff that they're experiencing, but they're adding to the story to make it more, have it more
sensationalized.
Yeah, well, not sensationalized, but they're adding to the story to give it more punch.
It says some of the beings began to talk excitedly and point in his direction. Ingo explained this to Axel and asked him if they also possess psychic abilities.
Well, humans do that, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, by advising Ingo to physically move away from this place. At this point, Ingo began to fear for his safety and asked Axel if it were possible that they would harm or even kill an earthbound psychic if they knew that such psychic possessed the capacity to spy on what might be intended as clandestine activities. Axel assured Ingo, there is no conclusive evidence to suggest that. A tepid and hardly reassuring response that caused Mr. Swan to become quite upset. Anyways, it goes on, and it's, you know, I read this once before, and it's just like, wow, man, it's too much to believe in. I just dissed it, right? It's being nothing. But then the more people I talk to and ask about remote viewing, just about everyone I've asked about remote viewing says they think it's real.
There's something to it. I'm not going to say that it's real the way that it's described by a lot of these people and their visions that they see. A lot of it has flavor added to it, obviously.
Yes, I agree.
That's what
with
humans do. So, but again, the base, their base experience will give them some information, because, again, we're connected to Jupiter, we're connected to Saturn, we're connected to the moon, if we're connected to the ether, and the ether is everywhere and in everything, then guess what? We're all connected to everyone and everything, and I mean, we can go there and experience that if our minds have the ability to do that, if we're genetically tuned to easily do that. Some people need to take drugs to get there. You know.
Yeah.
Some people need to have a near-death experience to get there.
Yeah. I think people had the ability and have more likely lost it because our minds are so cluttered up with shit now, you know.
Yep.
You know, thinking about
we were
rubbish.
Telepathic at one time, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I think it was more animalistic in the past. The animal mind, how.
Well, they're telepathic as well.
Well, they
yes.
I don't know if they're exactly telepathic, but they get a lot of cues from visual and verbal.
What is it they say when you're going around like a big dog? Don't show him you're afraid. He'll know. Yeah. They can smell fear.
They know where the back members are if they're far away. You know, they can find a bird. A bird can find its mate at sea from hundreds of miles away.
And I wish I could find one.
You'll have to grow some wings, Greg.
Where's my mate? Is my mate out there?
Hey, Greg, you've got to look. Greg, you've got to be prepared to look first.
What? Where? Tell me.
You can't find the bird if you're not looking for the bird.
That's true.
Well, that's
it's not going to knock on my door, is it? I know.
That's some deep bit thin.
Nikola Tesla says, I have observed electrical actions which have appeared inexplicable, faint and uncertain though they were. They have given me a deep conviction and foreknowledge that all human beings on this globe as one will turn their eyes to the firmament above with feelings of love and reverence. Thrilled by the glad news, brethren, we have a message from another world, unknown and remote. It reads 1, 2, 3. Nikola Tesla. He was saying beings were on Mars, communicating, trying to communicate with him. We know that there had to be some kind of civilization on Mars from all of the, what do you call it, archaeology that's there. You can clearly see it. Obelisk, what does this say? Were ETs given him the knowledge that only he could understand? He spoke of a knowledge base located somewhere in the universe that all of humanity can tap into if they could tune their minds to it.
Oh, there we are.
Was he given images to assist him in furthering mankind's technology? Every single songwriter that I know of, like Bob Dylan, Keith Richards, they all say that it's out there already and their antenna just picks it up. You know, could Tesla have tapped into an ancient source of knowledge? Was he rediscovering technology that may have been used before? And that's very interesting. And he says, in the past, there were stories of towers that relayed energy, obelisks found all over the world. They are all connected at some point, feeding off of Earth's magnetic grid. Well, that's the Earth is, you know, it's electric.
I'd like to add that if we were in the Purple Dawn and we were inside this energetic bubble, I think that the environment the electric environment was a lot more energized than it is now. Like you string a string 100 meters or 100 feet into the air, and you can draw power off of that. If you pound a stake into the ground, and connect to the one side, and in the other side, you can charge your phone. Yeah, there was more energy in the air available back then. If you do that on a mountaintop and take a drone and fly at 100 feet above you, you're going to get a lot more energy up there. You might even get a lightning bolt. You know, might even induce a lightning bolt.
He was trying to connect to an ancient energy grid powered by the Earth and the other planets. Like he was trying to tap into the power of the solar system.
Yeah. And
was he communicating with advanced celestial beings that visited Earth thousands of years ago?
No, the Birkeland currents and the telluric currents that run through the Earth. Our Earth receives 10 million amps every second of every day from the sun along the Birkeland currents. It comes in, it goes down in through the double layers, short circuits here and there, and goes into the planet itself, the crust. It grounds, basically. And then, where does it go after that? I think it goes even deeper and feeds into a plasmoid that the molten rock might be the plasmoid.
I think so too.
That contains all this electrical energy. Right?
Well, I think so too. And to get back to Tesla, when he built that Wardenclyffe Tower, his goal was to support these flying machines, what he'd also devised. Apparently they were a bit too heavy and cumbersome, but the idea was that they could just remotely take the power from the tower and fly around the place. And if there were a network of them, you've got flying people. Maybe that's what was happening in ancient India with these massive lingams and towers and pictures of Vimanas everywhere whizzing around. Maybe that was a technology that Tesla kind of reimagined. You know,
it's very possible.
Yeah. And then if you look at things like the Dogon of Africa, they not only did they know Sirius B before it was found by modern astronomers, they also were talking about Sirius C, and that was only found out. That was only found very, very recently, this is ancient doggone knowledge. And these guys.
How far did T. Townsend Brown get with his anti-gravity technology after the 1930s, when we heard no more about it? Zero.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was shut down to the public. It was not allowed to speak about this topic to the public after the news reports started coming out of that he was doing anti-gravity work, and that he had figured it out. That he put charge to these discs, and they levitated. They moved.
Yeah. Well,
you're talking about what's that called? Belfield Brown?
T. Townsend Brown. He was a protege of, guess who? Nikola Tesla.
Yeah.
He worked with Tesla in the 20s and in the 10s, and he was basically a scientist. And I maintain that because of the fact that he found anti-gravity technology and figured it out, that Tesla, and the United States government, not them directly, but the CIA, basically put out this aliens story, this ET story, to explain all of these crashes that they were having, for one, and all of these sightings that they were having, for two.
Yeah.
They didn't get a hold of the crashes. They didn't figure out how to control these ships until the 80s. Once they got the computing power to be able to.
We were headed for a Jetsons like
control them better, you know.
Yeah.
So
that's
my thought on it.
Well, it's plausible, and also.
Well, a lot of the evidence points to it, because before that, it was talk of the gods from Sumeria, and that talk really didn't start again until the late 40s, early 50s.
Yeah.
Before that, it was just the gods, and we know them to be the planets. We know them to be the planets. There's no question. They even name them themselves as the planets. So you guys have to make a decision for yourselves. You guys got to research all the information and come to a conclusion yourself. And know that it's stated that the CIA's main aim is to have everybody confused and believe all kinds of different things.
Yeah, like this alien invasion impending, Yeah.
They're not. They say that the CIA is not supposed to mess with the American public, but they do.
Of course they have. It's a mind psyop. It's all been a psyop from the word. Most of science is a psyop.
Yeah.
Most of science is, isn't it? It's pushing belief a little bit.
Gravity is electric. That's why they can overcome it. You can create your own gravitic field just by spinning freaking Mercury. 45,000 RPMs under 250,000 atmospheres pressure. That's what they do. And it all started with Tesla and Townsend Brown. And they were anticipating this great Jetsons kind of universe in the 50s.
Remember it.
And
I was born in the 60s and the 70s, and we were supposed to have flying cars by the 80s and 90s.
Yep,
flying. They were supposed to have flying cars in the 60s,
right.
in the 50s.
Mm-hmm. That's where the Jetsons came from.
Military-industrial complex wins again, and who controls them? You know who controls them is the banksters.
Yeah,
there's somebody else above them too.
Yeah, the banksters. You got that right. That's where it's all coming from.
Yep, all the control, everything. The want to have 500,000 people only on the planet. That's for them to easily control.
Control
no
the
other
means of
reason.
production.
No other reason.
They
Yeah, I'll
control
go with
the means of production.
They think we're using up all the resources. We're taking everything from their world.
Right. Yep. That's right.
That's the way they look at it. It's their planet. It's not ours. We're just
Even America, we were intended to be a plutocracy. We weren't intended to be a democracy.
like Enki and his slave. We're just slaves to them.
Yes, that's it. Worthless eaters. That's how they look at us.
Yeah.
Where do these people live?
And there you go. You've just gone back to the.
You want to go
You've
fire
just gone back
bomb
to the original question.
They live in
Oh no, you wouldn't get close enough.
the Hamptons.
You wouldn't go get close enough.
Yeah, and to get the disk to move, all you have to do is apply more charge to one side or the other, and it'll move in that direction. Simple, huh?
Mm-hmm. Quite.
And
We all should have
and
a UFO.
and there's a clue to what gravity is. That's a clue to what gravity is. It's an electromagnetic force. It's a reaction of the amount of matter that's being charged by the sun that it's in, or in the interstellar space that it's in. That's all it is. Gravity is part of the electromagnetic force. Based on an atomic rule.
It has to
The more atoms, the more gravity, period. Like the more atoms, the more magnetic field you get too.
Okay. What did you say, Grouch?
So we're back to Enki, Anu, and Adapa. We're back to Enki, Anu, and Adapa. And stories. And stories
that was
getting into a really different field, because the story comes down to now what Rick's talking about, where it comes down to control and control of the means of production, which you could work in your Berkman currents, all those things. It's a control of the means of production for the control of, I suppose you could say, the masses, or the mass.
So who were the Anunnaki?
So you could say the creation of life and all that's got nothing to do with humans. That's just pictured so that people can sort of under picture on it. You could say that it's a creation of what, like Rick's saying, it's a creation of the ether, you know.
Were the Anunnaki like giants, like gods with a little g? They came here and taught and made humanity?
They were teachers in Mesoamerica, weren't they? Mm-hmm. They taught them everything: how to grow crops, how to build houses, how to build everything.
Large white man, yes, with a beard.
Again, you come to your positive and negative ions.
What, Rush?
Again, you come to your positive and negative ions. When you're talking about that, you know, that's what I was talking about the other night when I said to you about the biochar. So, all right, Rick or Nick might be able to answer this. What's the difference between sea salt and salt created on, you know, on ground? Did anyone know? Did you get a chance to look it up?
What?
Greg?
Did I get a chance?
I don't know.
The other day, right, well, when we were talking to someone a couple of weeks ago, mentioned salt coming from Saturn. Is that right?
Salt, yes.
Right, yeah.
From Saturn, yes.
Right. Salt comes from Saturn, right?
I've never known matter to accrete salt. I've never heard of that before in my life.
Right. Okay. So I was doing some research on biochar, and when you do it, if you get it hot enough and you turn your wood to a white ash, you now have in that wood salt. So if you use a lot of that ash, from the burning of organic matter, you accumulate salts in your soil, right? But if you just get it to the charred state, you have no salt in it. So would that be a transmutation through the burning process of organic matter? So then Greg said to me, yeah, but sea salt's different, right?
Don't you think sapphire can make sodium atomically?
No problem at all.
Do you think the sun? Do you think the sun can make sodium atomically? Do you think what's going on in the atmosphere of Saturn is not making sodium?
Yes, but what I'm getting at is, what is a transmutation for it to do it? Does it have an organic, what we would call, as in through our trees, grasses, organic matter, right? That's one way to get it. But right, that's what I'm getting at. That's what my question was. When I said to Greg, it was just like, we come across where salt comes from Saturn, right? But then it would appear also that we produce salt here too.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So what I'm saying is, say all our salt came from Saturn may not necessarily be the correct answer. We produce, so that's why we have, in areas of the world now, we have problems where we have high salt levels, where we can no longer produce food.
Look at the Dead Sea. There's just piles and piles and piles of it.
Yes.
Yep.
I think Saturn's
Had to come from somewhere.
So
blowing in their atmosphere. See it.
Look at Jesus chasing them out of the temple. That a boy, Jesus. Get him.
Turn them tables, bruh.
Get them bankers.
Yeah, banksters.
I think there is. I think there's an element. I think there's an element of this production of, for example, they reckon chickens can make their own calcium if there's no calcium around. They can produce calcium out of phosphorus or potassium or something like that, which is the next one to sodium, I think, and maybe life forms are actually producing some salt.
We do transmutations in our body. It's proven fact that humans do transmutations. There was the case of the welders who were breathing in
argon or
they were breathing in some gas, and it was giving them CO2 poisoning or something like that. It was their lungs were transmuting that gas into another chemical that was not good for them. So we do atomic transmutations in our body. That's nothing new. We're a microcosm of the macrocosm, boys and girls.
I think we are. Yeah, we're a little plasmoid. Each one of us is a little plasmoid in our own right, knocking around.
Apparently, we have two.
Yeah.
One in our head, and the other one is our heart. Because if you look at the heart muscle, it's if you took a heart muscle and put it on a table and cut it in the right areas, you can make it into a strip. It's basically a strip, rolled up.
I was gonna go somewhere. Oh yeah.
Yeah, but apparently the heart kicks out a bigger electric field than the brain does, and I think the stomach kicks out an even bigger one.
That's because of the muscles. That's that muscle pumping.
If you look at it, and if you look at it, there's probably a good case which may come out in the future, where the brain's only a storage. It's the heart and the gut.
It might not even be a storage vehicle. It may, in fact, be a vehicle that, when we upload to the cloud or God or the ether, our experiences and our
Hold on, I have to
thoughts.
Something wrong?
that we
No,
can retrieve them very readily because the synaptic patterning, we just go boom, and we can pull it back out of the ether instantly. That may be how our brains.
Yes, because again, Greg said to me when he was working on one of his videos with this empty animal, why would you not choose eternal life? Didn't you, Greg? Remember that?
Yes, I did.
You said, I didn't choose eternal life. And my answer was, yes, but then you cannot be reborn. You can only be once. That's it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you could never be reborn.
I like that. Oh, great.
That means you can never produce. You can never reproduce. Which means what's there today is there forever. Which goes back to Rick talking about what the elites don't want all of us. Right.
I was reading. I wanted to find something that VELIKOVSKY talks about this very thing, salt on the earth.
Oh, yeah, it's interesting.
And he has ash too. That's but something said here.
Well, you got to remember that pure sodium, is one thing. The sodium that we have on our planet, when they say isotopic, they're talking about other isotopes included into the mix. That includes deuterium, which is a form of sodium, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
deuterium is
deuterium.
Yeah, deuterium
hydrogen.
water is it's a form of it's an isotope. It's not a form of sodium. It's an isotope that is in the water on Earth. We have the same concentration
hydrogen.
of sodium. We have the same concentrations of what did I just say? Deuterium and other isotopes.
Tritium.
In our water on the Earth that have been found in the rings of Saturn. This identical. The word used was the isotopes are identical.
Yeah.
Identical.
Yeah.
So that tells.
Sorry, I didn't mean to play it so long, but whenever the four of us guys get together, it's always really interesting to me. I always have enjoyed speaking with EDUSA, Andy, and Shockwave. Not that I don't enjoy chatting with everybody else, I do, but it's just they're engaging. You know, they always make me think. And I didn't want to play the whole thing, so I'm going to stop it there. And we'll skip ahead one more time. I'm going to log in about 10 minutes. So let's just see what else the smorgasbord has to provide. All right, here we go. Shuffle. What's next?
I enjoyed the chronology part of the last video quite a bit. So I decided to go back and go through it a little bit more methodically.
Okay.
And
we've already seen that.
I basically been since the Electric View, I've been taking like a sabbatical to deal with my own issues, and now they're not completely dealt with, but I have my ups and downs, but my positivity for the EU hasn't stopped. I'll tell you that.
yeah,
It has positive feelings to it. I mean, one of the things I got to do when we were there in 2016 was have set up a little artist symposium, because I realized that a lot of the people that were there were people like poets, storytellers, like Gata Shea and
right brain.
And their work is, I think, in some cases more important than than the actual science itself, in a sense. I mean, look at what Star Trek did for an entire generation.
Yeah, no doubt. That's true.
It changes your mindset. I mean, I'm not one to, I'm the first person to say, hey, I don't agree with everything Einstein ever said. I'm guaranteed. But man, I love the idea of transporters and warp drive, and this whole idea of wormholes going to other planets and Stargate. Yeah, I'm all for that, even though it's fiction. In my book now, once your mind clicks, it can't go back. In a paradigm, I can tell you what the other paradigm was like, but not with the same vigor as one who has switched a paradigm, I guess. But
you know what Velikovsky says about fiction, right?
No, go ahead. Tell me the quote.
Today's science is yesterday's fiction, or tomorrow's fiction is today's, science. It's tomorrow's science. What I'm trying to say, today's science fiction is tomorrow's science.
I'm often of the thoughts that it could also be that yesterday's science became a fiction.
Well said, Neil. That is very true.
I know what you mean.
Yes. I'm sorry, I butchered that.
You butchered it. Yes, It's okay. It's but you are thinking, the idea that we, if we can imagine it, it's darn near impossible for us not to do it.
Vincent.
If giants existed in the remote past, then Genesis 6:4 reads, there were giants in the earth in those days. They must have had customs of their own that included religious practices and traditions, well worth knowing. Had they not been lost forever? Well, maybe not forever. Prehistory tells us all about the extinction of the dinosaurs and the unforeseen rise of brute man, the troglodyte, the Neanderthal, the Cro-Magnon, and then Homo sapien. The prehistoric record, like the Akashic record, offers evidence of much more than that. Records of giant beings and giant earthquakes, universal deluges, stupendous volcanic explosion, incredible conflagration, and tremendous meteoric impacts. These were terrestrial and celestial events of planet-encircling magnitude, all outlined in the psychological records of mankind. The individual subconscious or the collective unconscious. If there were humanoid creatures to witness such events and extinctions, they must have been traumatic in the extreme. The suggestion is that events of apocalyptic dimensions result in racial trauma, cultural amnesia, and individual denial, post-traumatic disorder brought about by apocalypses. I could imagine it would just be beyond maddening. There are rich, reoccurring individual references in fringe, ancient, and occult literatures to civilizations anterior to our own. These civilizations are generally described as seafaring societies with high degree of technological expertise that in some fields surpassed our own, as well as psychic attainments that beggar the imagination. I thought it said bugger the imagination. Shambhala, Mu, Lemuria, Atlantis, Avalon, Arcadia, Nuremberg. Their names resonate with the spirit and energy of poetry, of the cultures and societies that flowered in the distant past and then disappeared seemingly beneath the waters of the world. Fauna and flora, edifices and animals and early human beings, seemingly without leaving a trace. Like Debussy's Sunken Cathedral, the islet of Mount St. Michael, the menhirs of Karnak. They resonate in the human imagination. They are like dreams come true. Here we enter the realm of dreams. Did not Plato describe art as dreams for the waking mind? Canvas of the earliest days of Earth is in the dream screen of the psychoanalyst, and describing it might be what is called true dreaming or dreaming true. Dreams beget speculation, and speculation begets theories, which may or may not have an air of certainty about them. There is a heritage of speculation, semi-scientific, quasi-scientific, about the face of early Earth. This is the providence of the independent thinker, who plays in modern times the role of the savant or bard of old, the custodian of tradition, who entertains his fellow human being with the tribal lays, In our time, their tales shine with the veneer of science. One of the most influential independent thinkers of the modern period is Hans Horbiger, 1860 to 1931, the Austrian mining engineer who proposed his once popular cosmic ice theory. Horbiger undertook his work in earnest. He regarded himself as a genius, or at least he regarded his findings as the work of genius. Indeed, he had no false modesty, having once boasted that he knew he was right when I knew that Newton was wrong. In 1913, he advanced his theory of the frozen cosmos to the German publication of Cosmology, written in collaboration with Philip Fauthen. His book was widely reprinted, though curiously it never appeared in English translation. There are two reasons why his work is of present-day interest. First, his philosophy is an instance of a theory contrary to fact, like the flat earth theory or the hollow earth theory. Second, it is an example of the occult thought that attracted the interest of the Nazi theoreticians and ideologues, especially Heinrich Himmler, who on behalf of the Third Reich incorporated the cosmic ice theory into Aryan science. For these reasons, its influence was initially limited to the German-speaking world. Indeed, the English-speaking world kept the cosmic ice theory at arm's length. In post-war years, it attracted the interest of a handful of dissident thinkers in England, and their interest sparked that of Seurat, who in turn kindled an interest in these ideas among the French-reading public. All in all, Seurat was the most respectable and the most prominent spokesman for such thought in any language, and they only one with an independent reputation as a writer and educator. Now, scanning down further on here, I noticed he's got this written, and you can easily, I'm thinking along the lines of Saturn theory, but Horbiger is the guy who's got the successive moons crashing into the Earth, his glacial cosmology. Apparently he must have been a German, and, you know, but this is a pretty good little read here. This presents a new development, stimulating and provocative, of the theories advanced in a well-known series of books by H.S. Bellamy and Peter Allen. Like Mr. Bellamy and Mr. Allen, Professor Seurat accepts the glacial cosmology of Horbiger. Its theories of successive satellites crashing into the Earth, crashing to the Earth, and subsequent global cataclysms. In these events, Professor Seurat argues, are to be found not only the origins of some of our major myths, Atlantis for example, but also an explanation of certain puzzling anthropological remains of superhuman size. Can it have been, he asks, the gravitation pull of our tertiary satellite induced both gigantism and longevity? If so, what happened after the subsequent catastrophe? During a golden age, can ordinary men have walked the earth under the benevolent tutelage of good giants? And did these good giants degenerate into the ogres of legend? The answers suggested by Professor Seurat created wide interest when the book was first published in France. I read it, wrote M. Jean Cocteau, with much more than my eyes alone. In this country, too, where Professor Seurat's work is almost equally well known, Atlantis and the Giants will be recognized as a notable contribution to Horbigerian literature. In one of Horbiger's books, I do believe he's got live fish falling from the sky, and lo and behold, it even happens to this day. Apparently, in these spouts that we call tornadoes, but they call typhoons, is it? Something like that. No, a typhoon is a hurricane. What's it called? Oh my god, I can't believe I can't remember. Oh, they're called suction cup? No. Professor Surratt is a daring thinker,
Hey, I can use that in my
impatient of provisional conclusions. All his books, from the philosophical dialogues written when he was a young man, to that very remarkable book founded on personal experience, The End of Fear, show the same exciting quality. In his latest volume, which has created wide interest in France, he develops the glacial cosmology of the Austrian scientist Horbiger and his followers, Mr. H.S. Bellamy and Peter Allen. His theory replaces the picture of a slow and humdrum evolution of the Earth by a violent and cataclysmic one. It describes terrestrial ages in which 3 moons in succession revolve so close to the Earth that, to quote Professor Surratt, they outshone the Sun, being very much larger, and later circled the Earth several times a day. Well, now, you know, we could just replace those moons for planets, because, like Ramon said, they're going to have an uplifting effect on the Earth. All of a sudden, everything's going to be a lot lighter, people are going to grow a lot bigger, animals, and later crashed on the Earth and destroyed all nations. The attraction exerted by these moons was so great that it gathered the waters of the Earth into a great bulge around the equator. That would be the Absu, I would imagine. Professor Surratt believes that they brought 2 golden ages to mankind. For he holds that man was not born until toward the last phase of the second moon. Perhaps 15 million years ago. Perhaps 15 million years ago. During first and the second golden age, high civilizations existed, fostered by benevolent moons. So this would be our 3rd time around. I've heard that before. Then the moon crashed, and the piled up waters at the equator poured north and south, inundating islands and continents. It was on an Earth left by the territory catastrophe that our own modestly attractive moon rose. Horbiger's theory of glacial cosmology is not officially accepted by scientists, yet the Horbigerian theory does seem to give a reasonable explanation for more things than the official one. For instance, the gigantic plants and the huge fossilized animals. Professor Surratt points out that an organism plant or animal buried normally today does not fossilize. It rots away. Fossils must have been formed by extraordinary pressures, such perhaps as the crash of a moon. And there are the stories, records, Professor Surratt would call them, of a giant race. He believes that the giants really existed, and he has an ingenious explanation for them. When those earlier moons circled close to the Earth, the gravitation exerted by them lessened the weight of all creatures, drawing them upward. Living things grew taller, and the giant race was born when the moon crashed. Professor Surratt believes that some of the giants escaped and later became the teachers of their high civilization to ordinary mankind. They lived to fabulous ages. In Greece, long after their death, they became gods or titans. But on giants, Professor Surratt relies mostly on the Bible, for there are they described objectively, without any theological coloring, since Jehovah, the one true God, could not admit companions or rivals. The Horbigerian theory does provide a possible explanation for the appearance of giants and the creation of man. The atmospheric conditions, let us say, on the other hand, a golden age when men were taught and ruled by wise giants, is perhaps nothing more than a pleasing imagination.
Well, I'd love to stay, but I gotta get my daughter up in 15 minutes for school. So I have to say adios, friends. And I enjoyed it, and I love live streaming. You never know when I'm going to be back, but I'll probably be back Saturday. And I have an upload that I'm working on. I have 2 uploads that I'm working on, and those should be out very soon. Just come over here to where you guys are and say goodnight to you, and hope that you can join me again another time, because it's always a good time. I love hanging out. Drew Duncan, Saturn Matrix. Hey, Saturn Matrix, good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. Let's see, I give you the tradition.
Saturn Matrix.
Yes. Ray Carr. And you guys are having a good discussion, it looks like. I hate to end it. Northern Rebellion? That's a pretty cool name.
Northern Rebellion.
Well, everybody, good night, and sleep tight, and don't let the bed bugs bite.
VELIKOVSKY.
I'll take care, and I'll see you on down the road. Good night. One song.
What is about you, woman? You didn't show me that bringing me down. 1,000-pound weight hanging from your neck. The only thing you do is never let her see my sweat. Then again, maybe I'm going about all wrong, 'cause that's when you just try harder. It's time to wake up and smell the flower. That part of you doesn't live here anymore. Living short years disguised in long hours. Think it's time to start living for today. Wake up and smell the flowers. That part of you is gone. Bye.